All right, so in this tutorial, we're going to cover how to make the tabs. You might have seen tabs before, but basically it's kind of like this. I'm just going to click on it. So tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4, tab 5. Ooh, okay, so, but it's all, if you look, it's all actually the same single page. So it's almost like subpages inside of a page, right? So sometimes those are useful to add. And you can do them vertically, you can do them horizontally this way, you can do them horizontally on the bottom, you could do lots of different things with them. Okay, so sometimes people make their navigation look that way, but that's basically what we're going to do in this one. And as per usual, if you just right click and save link as, you can see, you can open up that, it's just an HTML document. All it is what's here, but that's basically what this tutorial is going to be making. So first thing I got to do is open up Visual Studio Code, do File, New File, and I'm just going to go ahead and save this so that it automatically starts knowing to read it as HTML. So I'm just going to call it tab example. Obviously, you're going to just add it to your current site, or you can follow along this way too. Boom, and I'm just going to pause the video and slap in that code. All right, so got the basic code here. So what we're going to do is we're going to write the HTML first to get that out of the way. And what we need to do is make our tab buttons. Okay, so just going to be BT button, and we're going to give it a class name of tab BTN for the button, and we're going to add a on click attribute. And what that's going to do is when you click, it's going to run a function called open tab. And we're going to send it the button that we clicked. Okay, so if you remember, this is an argument that will go into a parameter of the function that we will be sending it to. Okay, so I'm going to give it a name called tab button. I'm going to say when we click on it, that it's going to run a function called open tab, which I haven't made yet, but I'm going to call it open tab, and I'm going to send it this, which means the thing that I clicked on, whatever thing that you're currently activating. Okay, so it's going to send it this button so it knows which one. And on this one specifically, we're going to add another ID, and it's just going to call it default open, just so that obviously one of the tabs has to be open to start with. That's the only reason. And we'll just call it tab 01. Okay, so it has a tab number. All right, now I'm going to take this and we're going to copy it, Command C, enter Command V. And I am going to go like this, get rid of that, and call it tab 2. And then I'm just going to copy this one for the other 2. Command C, Command V, Command V. Okay? And then we'll just make it tab 2, 3, okay, 3, and 4. Okay, so now we got our 4 buttons. Woohoo! Now we need to do is make the tabs that are going to open up. So it's going to be kind of the same thing. We're going to do one, and then it will just be repeating the rest of them. So it's not that big of a thing. So we're going to go div class. So we're going to make a div that holds the content. So we're going to call it tab content. And then inside here can be whatever you like. This would be basically the actual page. So in this case, I'm just going to do an H2, and we'll just say tab content 01 and tab, and we'll just do a P. Yep, this is a tab content. Okay, good. And then we'll just like that. Okay, so that is one section. So now I just need to copy that 3 more times. Okay, so we just need to do the same thing. Command V, enter, Command V, enter, Command V. So just Command C, Command V, and just change each one of them so it's 2, just so that you can see. But obviously you would put whatever you want into here. I'm just putting in that. Okay. Good. So that's all good, and that's the HTML. So pretty easy. We just need to make the buttons that we're going to use for our tabs and the content that's going to be expanded when you click on them. All right. Let's go ahead and do some styling, because style is always super exciting. All right, so in order to do that, again, these can be separate sheets, but I'm just going to go ahead and style. All right, and let's go ahead and delete that. All right, and so what we're going to do first is do one for the tab btn, so that thing that's going to hold this guy right here. Set tab button, and I'm just going to format it, and it's going to be background, oops, hyphen color, and I'm just going to make it the same colors as I did in my other one, so we'll just do this, Command V. Alright, so it'll be like a tannish color. The color of the text, I'm just going to go ahead and make white. We're going to do float, and we're going to float left, which just means that it's going to stick to the left. We're going to do no border, okay, none, because I don't want to see any border on it, and no outline either, because I think by default buttons come with outlines and borders. Cursor, so just so that when I hover over it, it looks like a clickable item, we're going to go ahead and put cursor pointer. Padding, I'm just going to go ahead and do 15 pixels, so it just goes all the way around. I could make that nicer, but I don't really care. Font size, and let's go 18px, and then width, we'll do 20%. Okay, so that one is important because basically the rest of them, you know, I'm just formatting the sizing and this sort of stuff. This one does matter because you see how I have 4 of these? In order to have enough room for all 4 of them to be in there, I need to make the tabs an appropriate size. Okay, so wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So I only have 4, so actually I want to make this 25%, right? Because if I take 100% and divide it by 4, I end up with 25. If I had 6 tabs, it would, I don't know what the math is on that. If I had 2, it would be 50% each. But I need basically each one of the tab buttons to go all the way across the screen, and so they need it, however many of them there are, divided by 100 divided by however many there are, is basically what we're looking for. All right, now let's go ahead and do a tab hover so that it looks tab button and hover, so that it, you know, looks a little bit different when you're hovering over it. And I'm just going to slap on this guy here so that it's a little bit darker when I hover over it. And then let's do a something for the tab content so that I can colorize it and all that other stuffs. So color, so the font will be black. Okay. The background color, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. We're going to make it that color. Alright, and display. By default, I'm going to set it to none, because obviously the content shouldn't be showing up for that until we click on the tab. So by default, all the tabs will be off. Padding, Paddington Bear, we'll do 50 pixels, just so that there's some room in there so that the content doesn't go right up against the side there. And then the text align, I'm just going to go ahead and center it, which is usually the ugliest thing, but let's go for it anyway. All right, save that. And then the last one I'm going to do is for dot tab active. So basically, when something when we're on the selected one, it's just going to color it differently. So color, we're going to do black, and background color, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. There we go. Okay. And we'll go ahead and save that. It's not going to look like anything yet because this will be, because we're making the tab content disappear. So all you're going to see are these buttons and they're not going to look like too much. So I'm going to skip previewing it and just go right to the next thing. So by default, these aren't really doing anything yet. We have all of it in there, but it's not actually functioning. So we need to add our script. Okay. So what we're going to do is, the way I have it set up is that we say on click, it's going to run this open tab function, and we're sending it the button that we clicked on. So what I need to do is make a function that's going to accept that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a function because that's the keyword, and we're going to call it open tab because that's the name that I decided. And what it sends me, which is that, it's going to be tab clicked. Okay, that's just the name I decided, but basically it's just a variable that's going to hold the thing that we get sent, and in this case, the thing we're getting sent is the button itself, so that way I know which button I clicked on. Okay, so that's why it's like that. Now we're going to run the function. So everything's going to fit in here. There we go. Okay. Tab. That's kind of weird. Hang on a second. Tab. Okay. Just want to make everything a nice tab. So we're going to do a variable called I. That's just going to be our counter. You might remember from doing the other ones that we can use in order to count the number of things that we have. We're going to do another variable called tab content. And I'm just going to go ahead and look, attach document.get lowercase, get element by ID. I'm sorry, by class name. Get elements by class name. And we're going to grab all the ones that are tab content. Okay. And that way we're all good. Okay. So basically it's going to look for all the tab contents. In this case, it's basically going to grab this one, this one, this one, this one. So it's going to grab all 4 of those, and it's going to put it into this variable so that I can access them later on. All right, so there's that function. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say for, we're going to start off with I, give it the value of 0. And then I, while I is less than the tab content dot length, okay, and then add 1 to the tab, the counter each time. So basically, it's going to run this loop. It's going to keep running it while this is true. And so what it's going to do is we're going to start off at 0. And we're going to say while this number is less than the length. So if you remember, the length of this array is however many objects are in it. So in this case, it's going to be 4 because we just put these 4 tab contents into it. So while while I is not that number. Now 4, if you remember, it starts at 0. So it's actually, this would be position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3. So while it's less than 3. And every time it runs the loop, it adds 1. So it should run basically, the idea is it's going to run through every one of the items in that tab content. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say tab content I dot style dot length, style dot display equals none. Okay. All right. So what this for loop is going to do is it's going to say, okay, run this loop for every one of them. And then when it, for every loop, so if it's at 0, right? So we'll start out with the first loop through. So it would say I, 0 is less than the length of it, which is currently going to be 3 because there's 4 items. Then we're going to say is tab content and then index 0. So whatever one's at 0, which would be the first one, okay? It's going to say take the style of that and the display rule and set it to none, which means turn it off, okay? Then it's going to run it again. Because it will add 1, so I will become 1. 1 is still less than tab length, and it'll say tab content, whatever is at the index position 1, which in this case would be this one. Okay, and then it's going to do the same thing. It's going to turn that off, and since it's going to run for however long the tab lengths are, and we're going to also use that same number that is our counter for the index, it will go through each one of them and turn them all off. That's basically what's happening. All right, so now that we did that, so we're just going to turn them off every time and then only turn on the one that we want. That's the idea. Instead of having to like turn the one that we previously had on, turn that one off, and then turn the one we want on, we're going to say every time we click a button to turn one on, it's going to turn all of them off and just turn on whatever one we want. So it's just a way to like make sure all of them are off initially, and then we will write a function, or not a function, a for loop that will turn the one that we want specifically on. So we're going to do a variable called tab btn buttons, and this is going to store the buttons. So document.get elements by class name, and the class name is tab btn. Okay, so again, it's looking for tab button, and if you look, all of our buttons have that here, so it's going to store all these buttons just like this one did with our tab content. So we're storing, first thing we're going to do is store all of them in there, and we're going to run a for loop on them. All right, so kind of like we did with the other thing. So for, I'll put a space in there to make it a little bit easier to read, and we'll start off with, again, we'll set I equal to 0, and we'll say while I is less than the tab btns dot length, and then add 1 onto it each time. So basically it's however many of those we have, which is also going to be 4 because you have a button for each tab. It's going to run this, okay? So what we're going to do each time we do this is we're going to say tab btns, and then we're going to say whatever, keep doing that, whatever one that we're on. So whatever loop we're on, so this first one is going to be 0. So whatever, so that would be this first one. So when we run the loop the first time, it'll be 0. And we're going to say that one dot class list dot remove tab active. Okay, so what this is going to do is, if you look right now, I have, oops, I've got to shift tab this. This got kind of weird. Okay, I have this thing called tab active. So when we do, oh, I can show you here. Click on it. When I click on one, when it's active, it highlights it clear. See how that's the one that's on. So tab active is for whatever one's currently on, right? But every time I click, I need the other ones to all be off. So this is doing kind of the same thing as with the let's get back here, as what this was doing, where it turns all of them off first. This is going to turn all of the tab buttons off initially. Just that way, whenever I click a new one, instead of having to turn off whatever button has that styling, it's going to turn that styling off of all of them. So it's going to say whatever one has this applied to it, just take that off. Right now none of them do. We're going to add that on afterwards, but initially it's just going to go through and make sure they're all off. Okay, now also inside that for loop, we're going to nest in an if statement. So we're going to say if the tab btns, the current one, so whatever current one we have selected, dot class, oh, I'm sorry, what am I doing? Whatever one we currently have selected, if that is the same as the tab clicked, it's going to run this bit of code. So tab clicked, if you remember, that is up here, right? So it says functions open tab click. That's where that came from. And if you remember, we get this information from here. So let's say I click this button. It says on click, it's going to run that function open tab, which is basically everything that we've been writing is inside that function. So it's going to run this function. And when it runs it, it's going to send it this, meaning the button that we're currently on. And that's going to get stored in whatever we put inside these parentheses, whatever name we chose. And I just chose tab clicked because that kind of makes sense for what that means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when it's running through each one of these tabs, it's going to say, okay, if the tab I'm currently on, whatever number one I'm on, if that's the tab that is clicked, if that's the one that was sent to me, that was the one that we actually clicked on, go ahead and do this. It's basically going to undo what these two things did. So what we're going to say is tab btns, the same one that we're on, obviously, dot class list, dot toggle tab, toggle tab active. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to say toggle is going to turn it back on. Because first what we did is we turned them all off. So if it's off, it's automatically going to turn it on. So basically it's going to turn it on and off. But if it's off, it'll turn it on, which is what it will be. So if we have it clicked on, it'll basically add this back onto it, is the idea. Okay, so that will assign this button here. If this was the second one, it'll assign it this this thing. Okay, now the other thing I need to do, so that's good, it'll now highlight it. If I were to actually preview this, Command S, and where's the thing? If I were to actually preview this, where are you, tab? You can see now, well, that's not really working, but we'll come back to that. That will turn it active. But the other thing I needed to do is, oh, you know why? Because, well, we'll come back to that. The other thing I need to do is actually open up the tab. So I'm going to do tab content, and we're going to do the same thing. So the tab content is the same I that we're on for the button, because these match up, right? Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this would be position 0, position 2, position 3, position, I'm sorry, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Well, these would be the same way. This would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So when this runs through, so this button is going to be the same number as this content. So they just line up. So I can use the same I that I was using to find the button to also find the tab. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on. So we're going to do display and then set that equal to block, which is the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but it's obviously it's not none. Okay, and that will basically turn it on. All right, so if that, this for loop will run. And then the last thing I need to do is I need to turn one on by default. So we're going to do document.get element by ID. And we're going to do default open. And we're going to do dot click. Okay. So basically what we're saying is in the document, find that element by ID, which is default open, which if you remember, I could make it button too. I just need to add this ID to one, so one of them starts as on. So it's going to find that element, and then it's actually just going to go ahead and like click it. The computer will do the clicking, right? So it's sentient now. Why is there a thing there? It makes me nervous. Let me see. Function. I think I have an extra ding dong there. Let me see. Wait. That might be more correct. Yeah, I think that might have been why it wasn't working. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's delete that too. Save this. And then go back to here. And we'll refresh it. So that one's automatically on. I click on this one. Click on this one. Click on this one. Okay. And you can see they're all working. Woo! Yeah, so I know it's kind of confusing, but basically we're using for loops to go through these arrays by matching up the counter with each item that's indexed at those different spots. All right. Good. All right, so that's how you would make tabs. Now, obviously, if you want to make more tabs, you would just make more buttons and make more tabs, but obviously these got to be the same number. And you can put pictures in there, you can do whatever you want, okay? And you can make them wider. Obviously you got to format it whatever way you want, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the tabs.